Thank you, Madam Speaker. Since December, the Premier has been floating the idea of ignoring Manitoba's fixed date election law and calling an election this spring or summer. And since then, he's been coming up with ever less believable reasons to call that election and to try to pin it on somebody else. He said the PSD would pass, then he said it wouldn't. He claimed that elections and advertising bans during Manitoba 150 would spoil the party, though despite having a majority, that his hands are tied and he's unable to change the rules, though he's been able to find time to change lots of other election rules to rig the game in his favor. In a rare moment of candor, the Premier said, and I quote, "I was in sports too long. I'm not giving away whatever minor advantages I may have. I'm not giving them away." Can the Premier explain how his time in sports inspired him to want to ignore the fixed date election law?
The Honourable First Minister.
Well, I don't think that the member opposite could argue he hasn't been given a heads up. That's one of the reasons that you want to have that legislation, I suppose, to make sure that opposition parties are ready. It would be on him and the opposition leader to get their parties ready. The second thing would be that we don't want to have what happened under the NDP happen again, which is that government shouldn't use their resources to promote themselves, which is exactly what government would be doing in 2020 when dozens and dozens and dozens of events sponsored by the government would be held throughout the entire year. You're put in an impossible situation as a public servant, Madam Speaker, in the sense that if you go to them, you're accused of doing the wrong thing, and they'd be doing that on January 1 next year, and they know that. So, Madam Speaker, it's most certain that the member has the obligation to get his party ready, and he needs to accept that challenge.
Here. The Leader of the Second Opposition on a supplementary question.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The Premier has also had a shifting stance on election finances. When the NDP were first elected in 1999, they changed election financing laws in order to undermine their opposition opponents, and the Premier has been doing the same. And he has referred to a rebate for approved election expenses, which by law are audited, as, quote, kickbacks, end quote. It's unfortunate the Premier would use that kind of language to describe something that is perfectly legal, but it's also surprising, Madam Speaker, because no party has received more than in what the Premier calls kickbacks than the PCs. And when the Premier was first elected in Fort White, his campaign took what he called kickbacks, and after this legislation was amended, he also said that they would continue to take what he called kickbacks. So can the Premier explain a sudden change of heart? Did someone from his own party point out that in an attempt to undermine his opponents, he would devastate his own party's finances?
The Honourable First Minister.
I appreciate the fact that the member has made several points in his preamble, none of which align with each other, Madam Speaker. That being said, this political organization, which I lead, is the only one in the province that has never taken the vote tax subsidy.
Right.
His party lived by it, the NDP lived by it, they felt they were entitled to it, and they didn't have to work for it, Madam Speaker. We eliminated the vote tax, and we also feel that it's appropriate that political organizations should earn their money by going and fundraising the way most charities, of course all charities in our province do, and other organizations work for the support that they earn. The member feels he's entitled to a larger subsidy and a larger office. Madam Speaker, I feel he's entitled to neither.
The Honourable Leader of the Second Opposition on a final supplementary.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Well, the Premier's decision to raise the donation limit to $5,000 has been a positive change. So now there is a lot of speculation as to why the Premier would ignore the fixed date.
Order.
There is a lot of speculation.
Order. Order. The Honourable Leader of the Second Opposition to continue.
There is a lot of speculation as to why the Premier would ignore the fixed date election law. Next year, the economy is supposed to tank. The Premier's complete lack of a plan and the consequences of his cuts are all coming home to roost. But there's something else, Madam Speaker. When Kiosk and Bipole 3 come fully online, their debt payments are going to start, and they are going to blow a hole in Hydro's bottom line to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars. Is the Premier just trying to stay ahead of the impending implosion of Hydro's finances, for which he and the NDP share responsibility?
The Honourable First Minister.
Well, the old adage would be, and I'm not sure it's valid today, but the old adage was that the PCs would benefit by a strong Liberal Party. If I was really just interested in politics, I'd wait till the Liberal Party was stronger.
Might be waiting a long time.
Order.
But really, Madam Speaker, the issue that we should be discussing today is from an article in the CBC published just a year and a half ago. Steve Ashton released a statement to media condemning his leadership rival for not owning up to the domestic violence charge, and says that incomplete statements do a disservice to women who are survivors of gender-based violence. Is this the reason, Madam Speaker, that Steve Ashton is not going to be allowed to be an NDP candidate in the next election? And if it is, Madam Speaker, we should all deplore that.